So I want to talk about some of the aspects of virtue that you're talking about, because I fully agree with this. I think that the supposed crisis that we're having in terms of happiness, the rise in the opioid epidemic, although some of that is due to bad diagnoses and people being given medical opioids and all of that, the rise in suicide, the rise in single motherhood, that in the end, these are mostly personal problems. These are people making bad decisions, and they're making bad decisions because they've been taught by society, by the government, by the culture, that if you make a bad decision, it's not really your fault. And that the beginning of wisdom is recognizing that it's probably your fault. Mm-hmm. Where do you think where did things start to fall apart? Or do you think things are really not that falling apart?
You know, it's strange. There's pockets that are falling apart, and there's sometimes a malaise or a fog over some things, but then there's entire segments of the population that are booming like never before. They're in the best years of their life right now, and maybe did even under Obama. You know, they had the best years of their life. But I mean, we share a book in our faiths, and my Christian faith, your Jewish faith, the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom, and all throughout the book of wisdom, the fool is juxtaposed with the wise. The wise does this, the fool does this. The wisdom is this, and wisdom is, in the Hebrew, you know this probably, is the art of living life well, is really what it means. And that's what we've lost, is wisdom. Not knowledge, but we've lost wisdom, as juxtaposed with the fool. And if you read through Proverbs, you go, well, I've done that, I'm a fool. I've done that, so I'm going to quit doing that. So I'm going to be wise. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. If you spend everything you make, you're a fool. Fool, I've done that. And then when I quit doing that and actually saved money, I had some money in the house of the wise. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? And so the art of living life well, and when you start to believe that if I plant corn, I'm going to get corn, if I'm going to reap what I sow, if I'm going to live in a cause and effect world where I actually can impact my own destiny, there's variables around me, there's isms. I mean, there's racism and sexism and baldism. There are people that won't let me do stuff because I'm bald. Hadn't been a bald president elected since television. Go look that one up. It's interesting. So, you know, these kinds of things are we got one with bad hair, but we don't have any with no hair. You know, right. I mean, and so
Jerry Ford was not elected.
But there's always, you know, I've got a Southern drawl, and for years in the radio business, now we've got 600 stations, but for years, people in Boston thought we broadcast from a double wide because we were in Tennessee, you know, with no shoes, you know? I mean, there's all these isms, right? Everybody's got an ism they got to bust through. I don't care who you are. But if you truly believe because of your ism, whatever it is, that you can't win, you're not going to get corn if you plant corn, then why would you ever plant corn? That's hopelessness. And that's the path of the fool.
Yeah, the way that I've put it on my own show is that I root for reality because there's nothing else to root for. Yeah. There's a lot of folks out there who are rooting against reality. And you see this not only in politics, but you see it in culture, just the general thing where people look at their life and they go, X or Y isn't fair. Here's a person who's really rich, and I'm not really rich, and that's unfair. And you see politicians say this without any solution. They just sort of put it out there, and this is their actual talking point. You say, okay, well, let's assume for a second that that is unfair, and that if you were God, you would even all that out. You're not God. You're not evening all that out. And even if you would even all that out, it wouldn't result exactly in what you want here. So maybe you should stop fighting reality and deal with reality instead.
You know, actually, wealth equality is unfair because effort is not equal. Smarts is not equal. I'm not as smart as Bill Gates. He's helped more people than I've helped. And as a result, he has more money. I mean, I haven't changed the world with a computer. He did. I'm not Steve Jobs. I didn't do that. Now, I've made a good bit of money. I've helped a whole bunch of people. But, you know, I was arguing with this lady, liberal lady, and she was mad at me because I had made a lot of money selling books to people, helping them with money. And she's like, well, you're taking advantage of all these people that are broke. And I said, you know, when I sold 5 books for $10, nobody was mad. But all you people got pissed off when I sold 10 million of them. And I helped 10 million people. And so, your level of return is the level of help. And so that just defeats the wealth equality argument completely. Because we now know that 79% of the millionaires in America today, 8 out of 10, inherited zero. Which means they did something in the marketplace. So the American dream is alive and well.
I mean, one of the things that I love about your show is that you actually do defend the morality of the free market. And that's something that very few people are willing to do in this day and age. It's all about the shortcomings of the free market, income inequality, the idea that people are being exploited. And it seems like they're coming from this perspective that even basic elements of life, the intelligent gaps, this should be somehow rectified. And you see this they'll use Bill Gates as an example. How is there a Bill Gates in this country who's worth this much money, and then you'll see somebody who's worth no money? And, you say, well, he's contributed more. And they say, well, but that wasn't his choice. He was smarter, right? He was smarter. He grew up better. How do you answer that?
Well, he did. He is. And George Clooney's prettier than me. So, I mean, so what? Deal with it. I mean, this is your hand, play your hand. And we had a leadership event. We did our Entree leadership event last summer and got to spend some time with Condoleezza Rice. And she grew up in a segregated neighborhood outside of Birmingham. And she was talking about coming out of that segregated neighborhood to become Secretary of State. She's brilliant and brilliant lady. And she said, my parents told me my whole life, it doesn't matter where I'm coming from, and what matters is where you're going. And you just decide that's what we're going to do. But that has to all the way back to do with this thing called hope and this belief that if I plant corn, I shouldn't be shocked if I get corn. And if I plant nothing, I can't gripe about the farmer who planted corn and was out there toiling to kill the weeds and in the hot sun. Meanwhile, I'm standing over here watching the guy, and then I go, well, it's not fair that he's got some corn.
I mean, I wonder if some of the complaints that are cropping up, particularly among young people, and I speak a lot on college campuses where there are a lot of young people who make exactly these complaints, that this is coming as the result of a breakdown in religious community. Because I'm a religious person, you're a religious person. There are a lot of rich people who have been, I've been a lot poorer. I've done well. That's changed, but I've watched the same thing happen to people in my community who I grew up with, and so I know all of them. And so it's a lot harder to be jealous of the guy that you've known and grown up with and who you can go to for help than some random guy on the street who you have no association with. And as we fragment as a community, there's more of a feeling of, well, maybe that guy owes me money, as opposed to, well, I've known my next door neighbor my entire life. We go to the same church or the same synagogue. The one area of equality that matters more than any, we are equal, which is we are all equal before God, right? God sees us all exactly the same. With that breakdown, I'm wondering if maybe that's what's caused a lot of the feeling of dispossession.
Well, and it's also, contributes to racism, also contributes to arguments between religion. I mean, if you sit down and spend time with people and actually develop a relationship with people that have different situation than you've got, you're going to learn there's good people and there's bad people in almost every one of those things. I know wealthy people all over the world that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They're some of the best people on the planet. And I know some of them that'll cut your throat just to see if you bleed. I mean, and I know some poor people that are some of the best people on the planet. And I know some of them will cut your throat. Hasn't anything to do with the money. It's got to do with their character or their lack of it. The money just revealed it.
So where do you think the country is going? Are you hopeful or pessimistic for the country? You deal a lot with individuals, but on a broad level, where do you think the country is going right now? I mean, my spoiler is that I'm always pessimistic, which is great for me because it means I'm always right eventually. Yeah. It's just a question of where the eventually happens. But are you optimistic or pessimistic about sort of the direction that the American people seem to be moving?
I'm optimistic overall. There's lots of issues. There's lots of problems. And I think the biggest problems we've got are not structural, and they're not systemic. The biggest problems are belief breakdowns, where people believe the wrong things. And when you believe the wrong things, then you make bad decisions because your worldview is screwed. And that's the most pessimistic piece I've got about it. And so to the extent that people like you can get out here and be thought leaders and teach people that what happens in their house at the end of the day is probably a lot more important for the quality of life they lead over the next several decades than what happens in the White House.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Ben Shapiro Show Sunday Special. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all our future content.